Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show where we sift through just mountains of information, really, to pull out those key insights you need to be genuinely well-informed. Today, we're tackling a really big question, one that honestly affects all of us, right? Whether you're leading a company, part of a team, or just figuring out your own path. What really defines success in this complex world we're in? We're looking for maybe a new yardstick for success, something that goes way beyond just, raw IQ. For ages, that felt like the main measure. We all kind of know that's just one piece, and maybe not even the most important piece. And when the conversation moves past pure smarts, Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, EQ, it almost always comes up. And yeah, for good reason. He laid out those 5 key parts: self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, empathy, and social skill. The sort of human stuff that often makes the real difference. It's a powerful idea. Now, we're not doing a full deep dive into all of Goleman's work today, like the detailed neuroscience or his whole argument about EQ being the #1 predictor isn't in the specific stuff we have here. But the sources we do have for this deep dive, they give us some really valuable angles on EQ, how it links to success, and importantly, that it's something you can actually learn. But look, the real mission today is even broader. We've pulled together a really diverse pile of source material: market economics, history, business strategy, personal growth. It paints a much richer picture, a more multifaceted view of what success actually means. This isn't about just one framework. It's about seeing how strategy, how organizations work, how individual psychology all weave together to create success. Or sometimes, spectacularly undermine it. You'll hopefully walk away with a really holistic feel for it.
Exactly right. And the sheer breadth of these sources, the multidisciplinary angle, that's what makes this so valuable, I think. We're not just looking through one narrow lens. We're pulling together perspectives from fields that seem, well, pretty far apart sometimes. Market theory, historical cases, business strategy, even personal development stuff. And the goal isn't just to summarize, it's to pull out those really actionable nuggets of knowledge to show you how deeply interconnected all this stuff really is. You'll see how, say, a strategic choice in a boardroom can ripple all the way through to someone's personal growth, or how leaders' blind spots can unravel everything they've built in the market. It's about giving you that comprehensive, kind of layered view of what it really takes to achieve and maybe more importantly, sustain success in pretty much any field.
Okay, so let's kick things off by laying some groundwork, a really solid foundation. Our first big area is the absolute core of strategic success. How do companies actually build and, crucially, sustain competitive advantage? And it starts with a really fundamental idea, almost primal, you could say. Lasting success in the market isn't just having a good product today or, a clever ad campaign next week. It's about building something much more durable, something one of our key sources, 7 Powers, calls continuing power. It's that ability to thrive consistently almost no matter what the market's doing day to day.
That's precisely it. When we talk continuing power, we mean the ability to generate persistent differential returns year after year. It's not just a fleeting edge that your competitor can copy next month. No, it's a structural barrier. Think of it like a protective moat around the business. It shields you from that relentless competition, letting you consistently earn way more money than your rivals. The 7 Powers framework is, exceptional for breaking this down. And at its absolute core, the whole field of thinking about strategy, what the source calls power dynamics, it's built on one single idea: the value axiom. And it's not just theory, it's a strategy has one job and only one job: maximize potential fundamental business value, period. So what does that mean practically? Every single strategic move a company makes, launching something new, buying a competitor, R&D spending, it has to be tested against that one question: does this directly help build or sustain our long-term value and resilience? If the answer isn't a clear yes, then it's probably not strategy. It's likely a distraction, wasted effort. It'll just chip away at value. Without building that kind of structural power, a business is just, adrift, tossed around by competition, forced to fight on price, on features, and that just leads to shrinking margins, less value.
Right, and we've seen this happen with some huge names. Netflix, their whole streaming story, it's almost a perfect example, isn't it? Building that early power, they weren't just good, they were pioneers. They got customers really excited with something totally new, unlimited stuff for a flat fee. Revolutionary back then. And that early rush of subscribers, it wasn't just a sales boost. It gave them an early relative scale advantage. And amazingly, they've kept it, even grown it. They built that advantage right into their position, made it incredibly tough for anyone else to catch up.
Exactly. And that early scale advantage, it was crucial, but it wasn't the whole story. Netflix didn't just sit back. They very strategically locked in their power by really smartly playing the industry economics, their cost structure, especially with that big push into originals and exclusives. Think about it. At first, their biggest cost was licensing content from studios. That's a variable cost, right? It goes up and down with viewership, contracts, not much control. But by shifting to making their own stuff, their originals, they turned a huge chunk of that cost into a fixed cost. So what's the magic there? Well, as their subscriber numbers kept climbing, the average cost per subscriber for that original content just plummeted dramatically. That created classic scale economies, first time really in streaming. It meant rivals trying to get in or even big players trying to catch up, they'd have to spend way, way more on content per subscriber. Made it incredibly hard to match Netflix on scale or price. That pivot, it fundamentally changed their game from just reselling content to creating and distributing it. That secured their power.
Wow. It sounds like there's a really critical window, though, like an almost unforgiving time frame to build that kind of power. It's not something you can just decide to do later on whenever you feel like it. You have to kind of create that moment, right?
Precisely. And Intel's story really brings this home, this idea of the power progression and just how critical timing is. Absolutely critical. Intel's lasting value, their decades of dominance, it comes from locking in three main power types: scale economies, network economies, and switching costs. And here's the kicker. They secured all of those by the time they hit what you'd call a stability phase in their market. Before it got mature and flooded with competitors, the insight there is pretty stark. The window to build those kinds of structural advantages, it closes. It just slams shut. If Intel hadn't nailed those powers down in time, they'd likely just be another low-margin parts supplier, a commodity business. That's what happened to loads of other semiconductor firms, right? Including some huge Japanese players and memory chips. They were dominant early on, but Intel outplayed them strategically. So the lesson is clear. Knowing when to build power, spotting that critical window during market development is just as vital, maybe even more vital, than knowing how. It's a make-or-break moment for long-term survival. Hashtag 1.2, crafting and executing differentiated strategy.
Okay, so understanding what power is, that crucial timing element, that leads right to the next big question. How do companies actually do it? How do they craft and execute the strategies that create this lasting power? It can't just be luck, right? There must be a deliberate, often kind of counterintuitive way of thinking involved.
Absolutely. Strategy execution, that's where the theory hits the real world. And yeah, there are distinct ways to approach competitive strategy, often challenging ways. Whether you're aiming for cost, leadership, or differentiation, both demand a real commitment to being distinctive. You just can't win by being a Me Too player by copying everyone else. If you do exactly what competitors do, you'll just get mediocre results. Stuck in a race to the bottom on price. Sustainable advantage. It requires thoughtful, creative choices, things that let you consistently offer a better value equation to customers. And this holds true even in industries that seem totally commoditized. Take uncoated paper. Sounds pretty generic, right? But even there, differentiation happens. Superior customer service, more reliable delivery times, maybe better integration with a customer's complex supply chain. It's not just about the paper itself, it's the whole package, the whole value proposition around it. Finding those unique, often subtle ways to add value that others can't or won't copy easily.
That's a great point about distinctiveness. It's the how, not just the what, the whole experience, the operations behind it. Which brings to mind that idea of value innovation or blue ocean strategy. Sounds like finding totally new ways to offer value, basically creating your own uncontested market space.
It is, yeah, and it's a really powerful concept when done right. Value innovation isn't just tweaking a product or making a small improvement. It's about doing two things at once. Creating a leap in net buyer value, so offering way more utility, more benefits, often at a similar or even lower price, and creating a leap in value for the company itself through profit. Achieving that double leap, it demands a very specific approach. It centers on strategic pricing and target costing. And the key thing here is your costs should not set your prices. You start with the strategic price, the one that delivers that leap in value for the customer. Then you work backwards to figure out the target cost you need to hit that price and get your profit leap. If you can't hit that target cost with how you operate now, well, the idea should either be scrapped entirely or you have to radically innovate your business model, your processes, your supply chain, your tech to make the costs work. It's a holistic, market-first way to create a new value curve where you basically make the old competition irrelevant.
So it's about fundamental shifts, not just tinkering around the edges. And, in today's world, things change so fast. Just having a brilliant strategy isn't enough, is it? You also need that ability to adapt, to pivot, to constantly reinvent. Otherwise, that power you built can just evaporate.
Exactly, which underscores how vital strategic flexibility is, and actively challenging the status quo from the inside. Top management's job isn't just looking backward like an analyst trying to make sense of past results. It's actively being a purpose creator and challenger of the status quo. This creates what some call creative tension, a dynamic, often pretty uncomfortable push and pull inside the organization. And this creative tension, it's a real practical challenge. It means you have to put resources and attention into optimizing your current profitable stuff that's exploitation of what you're good at now. And at the same time, you must fund and protect those experimental, maybe disruptive projects, that's the adaptation, developing new skills, even if they might eventually eat into your core business. You need separate teams for this, maybe different ways of measuring success, different KPIs, and leaders have to embrace both efficiency and disruption, not just cling to one or the other. It's absolutely critical for long-term survival in a turbulent world. Sticking to the old ways, that's a fast track to becoming obsolete.
Yeah, that perfectly captures how a leader managing that internal paradox fits our new yardstick for success. And when you talk about adapting, finding lots of small advantages, Jeff Bezos and Amazon pop right into my head. They have that famous flywheel thing, right? And this idea of weaving a rope of many small advantages, not just relying on one big thing.
Absolutely. Amazon's flywheel is a textbook case of a self-reinforcing loop built for continuous, almost exponential growth. The idea is lower prices, which they constantly push for, lead to more customer visits. More visits mean more sales volume. That increased volume attracts more third-party sellers, bringing even more selection and competition on price. Then, this bigger scale across the whole platform lets Amazon squeeze more efficiency from its huge fixed costs, warehouses, AWS cloud servers, delivery networks. Those savings then fuel further price cuts, which starts the whole loop over again. You feed any part of that flywheel, the whole system just spins faster. It's incredibly powerful and hard to replicate. And Bezos himself said it. We don't have a single big advantage, so we have to weave a rope of many small advantages. That's not just a clever phrase, it's a profoundly different way to think about dominance. Instead of one massive barrier like a patent, they focus on accumulating marginal gains. Hundreds, maybe thousands, of tiny tweaks, customer-focused improvements. This rope makes them incredibly resilient. You can't just cut one strand and take them down. You'd have to cut all of them. Almost impossible. It's really a testament to sustained adaptive excellence built on constantly iterating, a key part of that new yardstick. Hashtag PAG 1.3, market development and disruption.
That's a brilliant way to think about resilience, that rope idea. Okay, let's zoom out a bit now. Look at the broader market. Products, companies, whole industries. They all go through these cycles. And getting from a new breakthrough idea to mainstream adoption, it's often full of unexpected bumps, especially when innovation meets what the market actually wants.
Indeed. The high-tech market development model shows this journey really clearly. And yeah, it's far from a straight line. It starts with the early market. And the customers there, they're a special breed, technology enthusiasts, visionaries. They're not really worried about price. What they want are massive, order of magnitude returns from new tech. They love the potential. They tolerate bugs. They often work with the vendor to get things working. Early sales here are often like projects. The vendor basically promises to do whatever it takes to make it work for these early believers. But then comes this really tricky period, often called the chasm. It's this dangerous gap. The early market is still kind of digesting those initial projects, and the much bigger, more pragmatic mainstream market is just watching, waiting, skeptical, waiting to see if this new thing is actually reliable, easy to use, truly useful. Crossing that chasm, it's absolutely make or break for any high-tech product. It means the vendor has to take total responsibility for delivering the whole product, making sure the customer succeeds completely, not just selling them a piece of tech. If you just dump it on them and expect them to figure it out, you basically give up control of your own fate. You'll probably never cross that chasm. So many promising companies die right there.
Right, so it's that big shift from selling a vision to the enthusiast to selling a complete practical solution to the pragmatist. And it's often during that tough journey, or when these really disruptive technologies pop up, that we see that fascinating paradox, the innovator's dilemma, where these seemingly great, successful companies, the ones you'd bet on, they often stumble. Why does that happen? It seems so counterintuitive.
Oh, it's a classic. A real aha moment for so many people in business. The innovator's dilemma shows how established, well-run companies, despite having all the resources, all the know-how, often fail when faced with disruptive tech. And it's not because they're dumb. It's often because they're so good at what they already do. Their processes, their culture, even their customer relationships are all tuned for sustaining technologies, making existing stuff better, faster, cheaper for their current best customers. Think about Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC. Once hailed as one of the best managed firms on earth, yet they, like many others, missed the boat on PCs, on client-server stuff. That allowed newcomers like Apple, Sun Microsystems to just walk in and dominate emerging markets for things like engineering workstations. Same thing in programmable controllers for factories. Modicon, Texas Instruments, they nurtured that emerging market. Meanwhile, 4 out of the 5 big players in the old electromechanical controls, giants like GE, Westinghouse, they lagged way behind, critically behind. Only Allen Bradley, even though they had zero institutional experience in microelectronics, they got into electronic controllers early and actually built a market-leading spot. How? They set up a separate unit, shielded it from the metrics and demands of the main business, specifically to nurture that disruptive tech. It shows that getting in early with the right structure and mindset, you can build a leading position even without prior experience in that specific tech. It kind of blows up the idea that experience is always the key advantage when disruption hits. It takes a willingness to almost defy short-term business logic for long-term gain. That's a key part of our new yardstick for success.
So being too good at your current game, listening too closely to your best customers, that can actually blind you to huge new opportunities. Wow. But then there's this other fascinating strategy in our sources, almost the flip side. Creative imitation, or entrepreneurial judo. It's not about inventing the new tech first, but being the first to really commercialize it effectively, bring it to the masses.
That's a brilliant distinction, yeah.
It's where vision and market focus beat pure invention. Sony's entry into portable transistor radios is the perfect historical example. Bell Labs invents the transistor in '47, huge breakthrough. Everyone knew it would eventually replace bulky vacuum tubes. Yet for almost 10 years, the big American electronics companies just procrastinated. They planned to switch over maybe around 1970. They thought the transistor wasn't ready for consumers, too pricey, too unreliable, waiting for perfection. Meanwhile, Sony, almost unknown outside Japan, that's not even really in consumer electronics yet. Their president, Aki Morita, saw the opening, clear as day. In 1954, he gets a transistor license from Bell Labs for just $25,000, which, looking back, is unbelievable. 2 years later, Sony launches the first portable transistor radio, aimed right at teenagers who wanted music on the go. They didn't invent the transistor, but they commercialized it like nobody else dared. They innovated the application, the market. 3 years later, they dominated the cheap radio market in the US. 2 years after that, Japanese companies, led by Sony, basically owned the global radio market.
It wasn't about being the first inventor. It was vision, speed, manufacturing skill, and an unwavering focus on the market, especially overlooked segments. It proved that creative imitation, done decisively with a clear grasp of market needs, can be an incredibly powerful way to win, especially against innovators who are often too focused on the tech itself and not enough on the market, caught in their own dilemma. It's all about strategic agility, a sharp sense of market timing, not just raw technical brilliance.
Okay, we've spent a good chunk of time on the external game market strategies, building power, dealing with disruption, creative imitation. But now I really want to shift our focus inward to the engine that actually drives all this.
Yeah.
Leadership and the internal workings of an organization. Because look, even the most brilliant strategy on paper goes nowhere without effective people leading the charge and a team that can actually execute it, right?
Indeed. It's the human element, specifically leadership, that turns vision into reality, and the qualities of effective leaders. While they vary, there's a surprising consistency you see again and again. Drawing from Andy Grove's classic high-output management, a really foundational quality is clarity and being goal-oriented. Good leaders don't just talk about activities, work harder, have more meetings. No, they set clear, crisp, results-driven goals, increase customer retention 10% this quarter, new product hits X market share by year-end. Focus on outcomes, not just busyness. That's paramount. And Grove makes another crucial point about feedback. If a manager is doing their job right throughout the year, regular one-on-ones, ongoing coaching, then the formal performance review, it shouldn't contain any surprises for the employee, none. The review should just be a summary, not some big reveal if there is a surprise. Well, the leader has a professional, even ethical duty to deliver that tough message, because the whole point is to improve performance, foster growth, not just avoid feeling awkward. That disciplined, clear approach, hallmark of high output leadership.
Makes perfect sense. Clear goals, consistent feedback, no surprises. It seems absolutely fundamental. But what about the leader's own style when giving that feedback?
especially if it's criticism. That must be a tricky balance to strike.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us to the critical need for humility and radical receptiveness to feedback, even or maybe especially when you're the one giving it. The idea of radical candor really emphasizes this. Humility is key when giving both praise and criticism. Why? Because it breaks down that natural defensiveness people have. If you deliver criticism like you're infallible, like you have all the answers, it'll almost certainly just bounce off. But if you frame it like, look, I might be wrong here, but this is what I'm seeing and why I'm concerned, that opens a door for dialogue. Leaders shouldn't be afraid to be wrong, and crucially, they should actively invite people to correct them. Telling someone what you think, even if you might be mistaken, gives them a chance to tell you if you are. Turns feedback into a genuine two-way street. Admitting your mistakes, fixing them fast, showing you actually learn from them. That's also key to proactive leadership, something emphasized in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And that approach, it doesn't show weakness. It actually builds huge trust, strengthens relationships, and creates a culture where learning is constant. It's a vital part of that new yardstick for leadership, moving past the old infallible hero thing.
I love that inviting correction. It speaks to a real security and authenticity in a leader. So rare, so powerful. And speaking of authentic, I remember that great advice Steve Ballmer gave Satya Nadella when he took over Microsoft really gets at this idea of having your own internal compass.
Absolutely. Ballmer's advice was so direct, so profound. Be bold, be right, he told Nadella. And crucially, don't try to please Bill Gates or anyone else. That's not just a soundbite. It really highlights how important it is for a leader to be their own person, to have that solid internal compass guiding decisions, especially in those crunch moments, high-stakes situations. It's about leading from genuine conviction, not constantly looking over your shoulder for approval from the founder, the board, whoever. That theme of authenticity, following your own North Star, it's echoed really powerfully in Howard Schultz's philosophy at Starbucks, which he talks about in Pour Your Heart Into It, having the courage to stick to your guns even when it's not popular.
And Schultz's whole approach at Starbucks, that's a fantastic example of leading with values, isn't it? Believing you can do well and do good, that they aren't mutually exclusive.
Precisely. Howard Schultz truly believes a company can do well and do good, be highly profitable, fiercely competitive, and treat its people exceptionally well, all at the same time. He stresses how vital it is not just to talk about values, but to really imprint them on employees, make them part of the company's DNA. And once those values are deep-seated, then comes the critical part, trusting your employees to make the right calls within that framework. He believes this isn't just, being nice. It actively fuels passion, commitment, enthusiasm. When people feel valued, respected, believe in a purpose beyond just the numbers, they go the extra mile. That contributes to both the bottom line and the company's positive impact. He saw that as core to what makes Starbucks so unique, so successful.
Now, earlier we touched on Daniel Goleman and emotional intelligence. And while our sources today don't give us his entire theory, we're not getting into the neuroscience or claiming EQ is the single biggest predictor, because that's not in this material.
Yeah.
The specific excerpt we do have from What Makes a Leader. It offers some really valuable practical stuff about how EQ links to success, and importantly, that it's something you can actually develop.
Indeed. That excerpt makes a very clear link. A company's success is tied to the emotional intelligence of its leaders. And what's really encouraging, especially for anyone wanting to lead, is the research showing EQ can be learned. It can be cultivated. Sure, there might be a genetic component to some traits, like empathy perhaps, but nurture, experience, they play a huge role. In fact, EQ tends to naturally increase as we get older, which suggests that working on this stuff, continuously developing yourself in this area, it's beneficial for leaders at every stage. It's not fixed. It's like a muscle you can strengthen.
Okay, so it's not static, it's learnable. And Goleman flagged self-awareness as the first critical piece. What does that really look like in practice for a leader, beyond just knowing your strengths and weaknesses?
Self-awareness, as defined here, it goes deeper than just knowing your stuff. It's about having a really candid, often kind of brutally honest self-assessment. Leaders high in self-awareness, they can talk accurately, openly, even vulnerably about their emotions, their struggles, and crucially, how that internal stuff impacts their work, their team. There's a great example in the source. A manager explaining why she was skeptical about a new service her company was launching. She just admitted it. Look, it's hard for me to get behind this rolled out because I really wanted to run the project myself, but I wasn't picked. Bear with me while I deal with that. Not an excuse, just transparency. And then she worked through it, acknowledged her feelings, and within a week, she was fully backing the project. That kind of self-knowledge, being able to articulate your internal landscape and its effects. You also see it in hiring, people being honest about their limits, the benefit. It stops self-deception, lets you proactively manage your own biases or disappointments, and it builds huge trust because the leader seems authentic, relatable. Being able to acknowledge and manage your internal state instead of letting it quietly poison decisions. That's a powerful sign of a leader operating by that new yardstick for success.
That's a really powerful example. Transparency, self-management. Okay, another key component Goleman mentions is motivation. How does that show up in an emotionally intelligent leader? And what's the ripple effect?
Motivation,
Yeah.
yeah. In this context, it's strongly tied to a drive to surpass goals and interest in keeping score. This isn't just personal ambition wanting a promotion. It's more of an internal, almost relentless drive to achieve a higher standard, a constant push for excellence. And critically, that drive. It can be incredibly contagious. It can light a fire under the whole team. Think about it. A leader who lacks that fundamental drive, who isn't really committed to pushing boundaries, it's hard to imagine them leading effectively through tough times. So this intrinsic motivation, it becomes a powerful engine for the whole organization. It's usually coupled with optimism, a belief that, yeah, challenges can be overcome, goals can be hit, and a deep commitment to the organization itself. A leader like this doesn't just want personal success, they want the whole organization to win. And their actions show that dedication. They set a high bar, not just for themselves, but for everyone, making that pursuit of excellence feel like a shared, exciting thing.
And then there's empathy. That feels like the most, human of these traits. The one that sometimes gets dismissed as maybe soft or unbusinesslike in the cutthroat marketplace. But it must have a practical side for leaders.
Empathy, yeah, it's described as the most easily recognized part of EQ. We just kind of sense it or its absence in others. And you're right, in the rough and tumble of business, it can sometimes be mistaken for being overly soft or just saying, I'm okay, you're okay, or being unable to make tough calls. But the source is clear. That's not it. It's not about being sentimental. It's about being profoundly sensitive to the feelings and perspectives of other people. Why is that so valuable? It lets leaders truly understand team dynamics, anticipate what customers might need, navigate those complex relationships, interpersonal, organizational, much more effectively. Like, an empathetic leader might pick up on unspoken worries in a meeting or sense why a customer is hesitant about a new product, even if they're not saying it directly. This ability to sense and respond to the unspoken stuff, to really read the room, well, that can be a huge competitive advantage. It leads to better informed decisions because you're understanding, not just reacting. It doesn't mean you excuse poor performance, but you try to understand the why behind it, which leads to better coaching, better problem solving. It's pragmatic, not just emotional. And just to reiterate, the specific piece we have doesn't go deep into the other two components. Goleman talks about self-regulation and social skill, nor the neuroscience or the big claim about EQ being the top predictor. Our insights here are really focused on what's in this particular source. Hashtag 2.2, building high-performing teams and organizational culture.
Right. That's an important distinction to keep in mind. And it sets us up perfectly for the next topic. Because individual leadership, no matter how self-aware or empathetic, it doesn't exist in a bubble, does it? It succeeds or fails based on the collective strength of the teams around it and the wider company culture that either helps or hinders.
Indeed. Moving from individual qualities to collective strength, absolutely critical for scaling success. A really key insight from the discipline of teams is that using a team discipline, deliberately setting people up as a team, it only really makes sense if the goals require significant and essential collective work products and mutual accountability. That's different from situations where success is just adding up individual efforts, where everyone does their own task and you just total it up at the end. Like, a basketball team needs mutual accountability, connective work passing, defending, strategizing together. But a group of salespeople, each with their own territory, they might share tips, but their main work is individual. So if a group can't point to important, necessary collective results that only a truly interdependent team can produce, then maybe the team approach isn't the best fit. A single leader discipline or just a working group might actually be more effective. It's about consciously picking the right structure for the job, making sure that mutual accountability for collective outcomes is real. Otherwise, you're just calling a group of individuals a team, but it doesn't actually make them one.
So it's not just throwing people together. There has to be that deep, real interdependence for it to be a true team. Makes sense. And how do organizations keep these teams and the whole company really nimble, innovative, especially when the market's always shifting under your feet?
That's where building a culture of continuous change, of aggressive experimentation becomes absolutely vital. Think about Facebook's original motto, move fast and break things. That wasn't just a catchy phrase. It was a deep-seated culture. Aggressive experimentation, super rapid iteration, making decisions based on data. Employees were genuinely encouraged to try new stuff, launch features that maybe weren't perfect, learn from failures, and just move on quickly. No fear of getting punished. It allowed for incredibly fast adaptation, incredibly fast innovation. The risk of breaking something was seen as less dangerous than the risk of moving too slowly. And similarly, Sam Walton at Walmart. He made constant change a vital part of the Walmart culture itself. He even sometimes forced change for change's sake alone, almost like practice. Why? Not just to be random, but to fight complacency, to keep the whole organization sharp, ready to pivot instantly. That ingrained culture of always moving, it let the company drop everything and turn on a dime, which was crucial for winning in the brutal retail world. It's about building those organizational muscles for change, a critical part of our new yardstick.
That's fascinating. Forcing change just to stay agile. Wow. It sounds like clear, consistent communication and feedback must be absolutely essential in environments like that, where change is constant.
Oh, totally. Effective communication, especially positive and constructive feedback, it's like the lifeblood of high-performing teams and adaptable companies. The new one-minute manager talks about managers who spend most of their time actively catching people doing something right, especially when someone's starting a new task, learning a new skill. They call these one-minute praisings, and they're specific, immediate, given with real enthusiasm, clearly saying what the person did right and why it mattered. Not just generic fluff, it reinforces the right behaviors, builds confidence, and when mistakes do happen, there's a process, the one-minute redirect. First, you address the specific behavior right away. Then, a brief pause, silence, let the person reflect. Finally, and this is crucial, you remind the person that they are better than my mistake. You reaffirm your confidence in them, their value. This fosters accountability, but without fear, without crushing their self-esteem. This balanced feedback approach encourages learning, responsibility, and a culture where mistakes are chances to grow, not reasons to hide.
That mix of positive reinforcement and constructive correction. Yeah, sounds like it builds amazing confidence and accountability. But underneath all these interactions, there's something even more fundamental, almost invisible, holding it all together. Trust. Integrity in relationships.
Trust is the foundation. It's the air that great teams breathe. And personal integrity, crucial for building it, maintaining it. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People defines integrity not just as honesty telling the truth, making your words match reality, but maybe even more deeply as conforming reality to our words. That means keeping your promises, fulfilling expectations, standing by your commitments, being reliable, consistent. And one of the most powerful, often overlooked ways to show integrity. Be loyal to people who aren't in the room, like defending someone who's being criticized unfairly behind their back. That builds immense trust with the people who are there because they see you operate on principle. Conversely, duplicity, sharing secrets you were told in confidence, gossiping, it just destroys trust. Completely. It signals a basic lack of integrity, erodes the whole foundation of healthy relationships, personal and professional. It's about being the same person, same values, no matter who's watching or even if nobody is.
Right. Embodying those values consistently, every time. And as companies get bigger, more complex, especially globally, those traditional rigid hierarchies, you can actually get in the way of trust and speed, can't they?
They absolutely can. Modern organizations, especially in really complex, fast-changing fields, they're finding huge benefits by moving away from rigid top-down structures, moving towards more fluid webs and nodes, a real network approach. As Team of Teams describes so vividly, that traditional command structure, built for efficiency, predictability, it just breaks down when things get dynamic, unpredictable. Instead, thinking of the organization, whether it's military or corporate, as interconnected nodes, it allows for much more democratic collaboration, much faster information sharing. This information age task force model, yeah, you still have ranks, assigned teams, but the emphasis is fundamentally on being part of a larger, adaptable network. Moving away from isolated silos. Decisions get pushed closer to the action. Information flows sideways just as much as up and down. And having a shared understanding, shared consciousness becomes paramount. This shift towards a more collaborative, adaptable structure, it's absolutely critical for dealing with complexity, for being agile today. It replaces that slow central brain with a distributed adaptive intelligence. A powerful example of our new yardstick for success in how we organize ourselves.
Okay, this brings us to maybe the most unpredictable part, but arguably the most critical factor in any success story, the human element itself. We're talking about how we, as individuals, as organizations, grapple with uncertainty, risk, even our own built-in mental shortcuts, our biases when we make decisions. It's where pure logic often bumps up against ingrained human nature.
This is really where things get fascinating, yeah. Because our minds often play these powerful tricks on us, lead us astray even when we think we're being perfectly rational. One of the biggest traps is what Nassim Nicholas Taleb calls expert blindness in the black swan, especially about those rare, high-impact events, the black swans. Taleb points out that often experts do not know what they do not know. And maybe even more dangerously, a profound lack of knowledge can somehow exist alongside this unshakable confidence in one's own knowledge. It's bizarre. This makes it incredibly hard to predict outlier events. Because our models, our forecasts, our very ways of thinking are built on past data, known stuff. We're wired to see patterns. And when something totally outside those patterns hits, we're often completely blindsided. Taleb warns really strongly against just blindly trusting authorities who take their own knowledge too seriously, especially in complex fields like finance or geopolitics, where things are inherently unpredictable. He notes, for instance, how many economists make countless forecasts, but the data shows again and again no real difference in accuracy between them. And no specific things they're better at predicting than just random chance. This tendency to over-rely on perceived expertise, even when it's demonstrably flawed. It can lead to catastrophic mistakes precisely when the stakes are highest.
So we're often way too confident in what we think we know. And that can lead us down some really dangerous roads. And beyond that, our brains just seem wired to process information in ways that aren't always strictly logical, like preferring a good story over cold, hard data.
Exactly. We fall victim to these deep-seated cognitive biases all the time. Thinking Fast and Slow explores this brilliantly. For example, we often default to causal explanations. We build these neat little narratives, simple stories, even when statistical data gives a much more accurate, though maybe less satisfying picture. This preference for causal thinking over statistical thinking leads to loads of errors in judgment. Our System 1, that fast, intuitive, emotional brain, it loves a good, coherent story, even if it's wrong or incomplete. It's just easier, effortless. But our System 2, the slow, deliberate, logical part that takes real effort, might see a more nuanced statistical truth. But System 1 often just shouts it down. This love of narrative can make us ignore crucial base rates, statistical probabilities, leads to worse decisions. Like, you hear one compelling anecdote about a startup hitting it big overnight. System 1 might convince you your startup will do the same, making you ignore the overwhelming stats about startup failures. It's a powerful bias. Distorts how we see risk, opportunity.
And it's not just how we interpret information, but how we actually value things, right? Our emotions, our biases can even twist our sense of worth, make us cling to stuff just because it's ours.
That's absolutely right. The difference between decision value, the pleasure or pain we expect when we make a choice, and experience value, the pleasure or pain we actually get from the outcome, it's crucial. And those two, they don't always line up neatly, which leads to less than optimal choices. The endowment effect, for instance, it's fascinating. People value things more highly just because they own them. Simple act of possession. Like, if I give you a mug, you'll probably want more money to sell it than you would have paid to buy it just a minute before, clearly shows how biases subtly warp our choices, our sense of value. Although it's not totally settled science, some experimental economists argue this isn't some fundamental human trait, but more due to subject misconceptions, like people just misunderstanding market value or opportunity cost. They suggest that if you train people, teach them to think like traders, always assessing market value, not personal attachment, these biases can actually be reduced. That debate itself just shows how complex human decision-making is, and how hard it is to be truly rational. Even deep-seated quirks might be trainable.
So the markets themselves can reflect these human irrationalities, which I guess creates huge opportunities for people who can see past the herd mentality, resist that prevailing emotion.
Precisely. Howard Marks, in The Most Important Thing Illuminated, he nails it. Large amounts of money aren't made by buying what everybody likes. They're made by buying what everybody underestimates. Or, more accurately, what the market misprices because of irrationality. When you see that classic sign, too much money chasing too few deals, that's irrational exuberance. It signals a market where lenders ease up on terms, drop interest rates, basically loading up on risk. The smart money, therefore, looks for situations where the consensus is just wrong, or where assets are fundamentally cheap because everyone else is scared or short-sighted or just lacks imagination. And, a random walk down Wall Street points out something counterintuitive, too. High beta stocks, the volatile ones, supposedly higher risk, higher reward. Historically, they often don't deliver higher returns than more stable stocks. Challenges that common assumption. So just chasing volatility, betting on the riskiest stuff, not a reliable way to get outsized returns. Understanding these market quirks, these biases, and having the discipline to go against the grain, that can be a source of real long-term advantage. Crucial lesson for investors.
And zooming out even further, from individual choices to how whole societies organize their economies, there's that fundamental argument from Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek about the two basic ways to coordinate everything, right? With hugely different outcomes for freedom and prosperity.
This brings us to a really critical, almost philosophical divide. Friedman, Capitalism and Freedom, and Hayek, The Road to Serfdom, they argue there are basically only two ways to coordinate the economic activities of millions of people. One is central direction, using coercion. Think of an army, a totalitarian state, a centrally planned economy. Decisions come from the top. Compliance is forced. The other way, voluntary cooperation of individuals interacting freely in the marketplace. The market, in this view, is like a form of participatory democracy. People vote with their money. Decisions bubble up from countless decentralized exchanges. Now, collectivism, central planning, it might have this simple emotional appeal promising equality, security. But its track record, as Hayek showed so meticulously, it often leads to tyranny, economic stagnation, misery. Individualism, on the other hand, it's a more subtle and sophisticated argument, requires understanding complex interactions. But it tends to produce both freedom and incredible prosperity. It emphasizes that even with good intentions driving collectivist ideas, good men, given coercive power, can paradoxically end up doing evil things. Whereas ordinary people, cooperating voluntarily, guided by self-interest, they can collectively create immense, good, unprecedented wealth. It's a stark reminder of how fundamental structural choices matter. Hashtag 3.2, the imperative of personal growth and responsibility.
So whether we're talking huge economic systems or just our own investment choices, the mind, its quirks, its tendencies, it's always right there in the middle, which leads us perfectly to the need for personal growth, taking real responsibility for our own development. Not just at work, but as people.
Absolutely. And Peter Drucker's advice here from HBR's 10 must-reads on managing yourself, it's quite striking, often feels counterintuitive. He says, do not try to change yourself. You are unlikely to succeed. Instead, he advises, work hard to improve how you perform within your natural wiring. And crucially, be smart enough to avoid work you just can't do well. This isn't about giving up. It's about deep self-knowledge, strategic self-management, really understanding your preferred environment, thrive under pressure, or needs structure, big company or small startup. You see it all the time, incredibly successful people in huge corporations who just flounder in smaller, looser outfits, or vice versa, square pegs, round holes. Understanding those inherent preferences, your strengths, weaknesses, your personal operating system, it's crucial for optimizing your performance, making sure you contribute effectively, sustainably. It's about playing to your strength, consciously managing your weaknesses by avoiding situations that just make them worse, rather than trying to fundamentally change who you are. That self-acceptance, combined with relentless targeted self-improvement, that's a hallmark of our new yardstick for success for individuals.
That's a powerful idea. Self-acceptance plus focused improvement. And part of that has to be taking active responsibility for your own life, right? Proactively shaping things, not just reacting.
That's proactivity right there, a core habit from the 7 habits of highly effective people. It's fundamentally about taking ownership for your effectiveness, your happiness, your circumstances. Stop blaming external stuff, fate, other people, the core idea. Focus your energy, your attention on what you can control, your attitude, your choices, your responses. That's your circle of influence. Stop wasting energy on stuff in your wider circle of concern that you can't directly change anyway. Proactive people work on expanding their circle of influence through their own choices and actions. When they make mistakes, they own it, learn from it, move on. No excuses. As the source puts it so beautifully, the fountain of content must spring up in the mind for real contentment, meaning your inner state, your sense of purpose. It doesn't depend on what's happening outside. It depends on your internal compass, the choices you make day in, day out, self-mastery, internal locus of control, vital for navigating life.
And this journey of self-improvement, proactive growth, it often involves hitting rough patches, dealing with pain, setbacks. Those moments are tough, uncomfortable, but you're saying they're actually essential. Need to be embraced, not dodged.
Absolutely essential for real growth. Ray Dalio in Principles really highlights this. The critical role of reflection when you experience pain, when you hit problems. He suggests those difficult moments, if you actually embrace them, analyze them deeply, they are the most powerful catalysts for wisdom, for improvement. Instead of rushing past, trying to ignore the discomfort, you have to confront the pain, Understand its roots. Learn the lesson. That process builds the foundation for genuine, lasting improvement. Psychologists sometimes call it hitting bottom. That point where you finally embrace failure, face the harsh reality, stop deceiving yourself. That's the first crucial step towards real change. It's hard, but builds incredible resilience. And on a more practical note, the richest man in Babylon points out that just overcoming procrastination, that daily battle against putting things off, is key, maybe underestimated secret to success. That daily self-mastery, the discipline to do the hard stuff now for a better future. It's an ongoing fight, but crucial for personal growth.
Building resilience, learning from everything, even the painful stuff.
Yeah.
And in our world today, so full of distractions, always connected, another crucial part of personal growth that's really getting attention is the ability to just focus deeply, to do what's called deep work.
Indeed. Deep work, Cal Newport's concept, argues really persuasively that maximizing the intensity of your concentration when you work, that's what truly maximizes results per hour. In an economy increasingly driven by complex problem-solving, creative thinking, the ability to sustain long periods of uninterrupted, highly focused mental effort, it's becoming incredibly valuable, but also increasingly rare. Newport argues that prioritizing just 3 or 4 hours a day of this uninterrupted and carefully directed concentration can produce a huge amount of valuable output, work that really moves the needle on complex projects, far more than days fragmented by shallow tasks. How? By consciously minimizing shallow work, the less demanding stuff, often admin, often done with distractions, and strategically batching unavoidable distractions, email, social media meetings, into short, defined blocks at the edges of your day. It's about being incredibly deliberate with your attention, designing your day, your environment to support intense focus. This isn't just a productivity hack, it's a fundamental shift in how you approach knowledge work. Leads to higher quality, more innovative results, and honestly, more professional satisfaction. Core component of sustainable high performance. A real new yardstick for success in our attention deficit world. #tag 3.3, ethical dimensions and historical lessons.
So from the inner world of our own minds and growth to the big stage of markets and organizations, that human element is always there. And sometimes that element brings in some really profound ethical issues, as history shows us again and again. Let's wrap up our deep dive by looking at some of those lasting lessons, those cautionary tales from history, from impactful case studies.
History is definitely a rich teacher, often stark. Both success and failure are tangled up with ethics, with the darker side of human ambition. Take the frankly chilling story of Robert Moses, the power broker. His story shows the extreme dangers of concentrated, unchecked power. Master manipulation. Moses built this huge empire, fundamentally reshaped New York City for decades. Not through elected office, no, but by operating through this web of public authorities he controlled, intentionally keeping the public in the dark, bypassing democracy. He was a master manipulator. Used his charm, his intellect, sheer force of will to get commitments from powerful people like Mayor O'Dwyer. He'd often meet them alone, present these meticulously worked out plans, often ready to sign before the mayor even had a chance to hear other views, talk to advisors. That ability to operate at a distance, shield himself from public scrutiny, lock in key decisions without open debate. It reveals the tactics of someone amassing immense, almost tyrannical power. And he used that power not just for building bridges and roads, but to shape the city in his own controversial image, often hurting communities, ignoring social equity. The powerful lesson in how charisma and clever structures can be used to undermine ethical governance.
That's a truly chilling reminder. Power without accountability. And on the corporate side, we have the infamous Enron scandal, a story that just became shorthand for massive deception, corporate wrongdoing on an epic scale.
Oh, the Enron scandal, detailed so vividly in the smartest guys in the room. It's a profound, deeply troubling case of corporate lies, a catastrophic failure of ethics, of governance. It involved widespread, calculated deception that went way beyond just, creative accounting. Like they routinely booked prepays, which were essentially long-term loans as trading liabilities, not debt. Made their balance sheet look way healthier, less risky than it actually was. Deliberate obfuscation. And beyond the accounting games, Enron made these bold, false claims about having virtually unlimited bandwidth, built-in intelligence in their broadband network, even though the tech was brand new, unproven, nowhere near ready for prime time, selling future hype as current reality. And maybe the worst part, the board's clear failure to act on a specific urgent warning from an employee, Sharon Watkins. She explicitly told them about potential accounting scandals that could implode the company. It highlights a fundamental breakdown in ethical leadership and oversight at the very top. A culture of aggressive deal-making, chasing perceived growth, just overshadowed transparency, integrity, accountability, with horrific results for everyone involved. A stark reminder that even the smartest people can fall prey to ethical blind spots under pressure.
These examples definitely show ethical lines getting crossed, often with terrible results. But sometimes historical figures are more complex, right? A mix of huge ambition and maybe a different kind of moral code that's hard for us to judge now. John D. Rockefeller Sr., Standard Oil, he comes to mind.
Rockefeller's life, yeah, as told in Titan, it presents a really nuanced, often contradictory picture of leadership and ethics. He was a devout Baptist, known for strict, almost sternness business dealings, famously preferred justice to sentiment. He operated like a master puppeteer, meticulously planning moves, but often keeping his distance from the direct mayhem his ambitious lieutenants carried out. They often boasted about the unsavory deeds used to crush competitors. This gave him a certain remove, legally and emotionally, from the really cutthroat stuff. But the picture isn't all dark. Rockefeller also famously preferred, sure, steady gains to speculative killings. He disliked the risky, flashy moves of many others back then. Some associates noted he could be a surprisingly forgiving lender, almost too much so sometimes. This complex figure highlights those tricky ethical dilemmas leaders face, especially those seeking immense wealth while in his case also maintaining deep personal faith and massive philanthropy later in life. It forces us to grapple with the messy reality of history. Figures often defy easy labels, their actions having both huge benefits and undeniable costs. We have to report it impartially, not endorse, just convey the record.
From the ethics of titans to operational failures. Clear, precise communication is always vital. And sometimes, just the lack of one critical word can have catastrophic results, a really powerful, stark warning.
Indeed. The Avianca Flight 232 crash is just a tragic, stark example of communication breakdown analyzed in Outliers. They were running critically low on fuel, knew how serious it was, yet the crew repeatedly failed to use the one crucial, unmistakable word, emergency, in their calls to air traffic control. They used phrases like running out of fuel, sir, but with qualifiers, or described it as needing priority. But controllers are trained to react instantly to emergency. It triggers specific urgent protocols. This miscommunication may be partly cultural deference, not wanting to make a fuss, maybe cognitive overload under stress, maybe just lack of clear standard phrasing. It led to ATC just not grasping the true urgency. They cleared other planes, put Avianca in a holding pattern, unknowingly making things worse. Ultimately, that failure to use precise, unambiguous language, even knowing their dire state, contributed directly to the crash. Fuel exhaustion. It just hammers home how critical, clear, concise, standardized language is, especially in high-stakes, time-critical situations where lives are literally on the line.
Wow. A powerful, sobering lesson in precision under pressure. And finally, stepping back to the macro level, there's that fascinating, crucial argument from Paul Krugman about the fundamental differences between companies and countries. It's a common mistake, he says, to just apply business thinking to national economies.
Paul Krugman's point in "a country is not a company" highlights this fundamental, often misleading analogy that lots of business leaders, even policymakers, fall into. He explains that just taking business problem-solving skills, business metaphors, and applying them straight to national economics, it can be deeply flawed. Because the underlying financial realities are totally different. The core difference, balance of payments. Critically, a country's overall balance of payments must always balance to zero. Always. So, if a country runs a trade deficit, imports more than it exports, that deficit has to be exactly matched by a capital account surplus. Foreign money pouring into the country's assets. It's an economic identity that's fundamentally different from a company's finances. A company can, and often does, run a net deficit or surplus. It can go bankrupt. A country can't in the same way. Business leaders, used to thinking about competitive advantage, market share, profit loss for a company, they can easily misapply those ideas to nations, like equating national debt to corporate debt or seeing other countries purely as competitors like rival firms. It can lead to really misguided policies. Often underestimates the complex, interconnected, self-balancing nature of global economics. It's a vital distinction for understanding the world and helps refine our new yardstick by showing where business models just don't fit. Hack, tag, tag, outro.
Wow. We have really covered some serious ground today, haven't we? Just incredible stuff. From those foundational power dynamics defining market leadership, to the subtle art of leading people, building resilient cultures, and then right into the human struggles with decisions, growth, and those deep ethical issues. What seems abundantly clear is that success, it's rarely, if ever, just one thing, is it? It's this complex, layered interplay. Sharp strategy, effective organizations, and deep, often challenging personal insight, all woven together. Whether you're trying to build market power, lead a great team, or just manage yourself better in this crazy world, that ability to understand and adapt to external forces and internal dynamics seems absolutely key. And so many of these principles, the importance of integrity, needing strategic flexibility, overcoming our own biases, they just echo across time, across cultures. Shows how timelessly relevant they are to chasing success.
And this whole deep dive, it really brings us right back to where we started, that idea of a new yardstick for success. It's definitely not just IQ, and it's not solely about EQ either, though both are clearly important, and our sources definitely highlighted key ways emotional intelligence plays a role. Instead, real, lasting achievement in business or life. It seems to rely on the sophisticated, always evolving blend, clear-eyed strategy that sees past the obvious, principled, adaptive leadership that inspires and empowers, and maybe most crucial, a profound, honest understanding of human nature, our own biases, our motivations, our surprising capacity for both amazing growth and devastating mistakes. It's about constant learning, constant adapting, and constant, often uncomfortable, self-reflection. So considering this whole multifaceted nature of success we've unpacked today, everything from defining market power to cultivating personal integrity, navigating cognitive biases, here's a final thought for you. What specific aspect of your own pursuit of success will you choose to consciously refine or maybe challenge next?